Flight attendant refuses to let a black father sit next to his kids, not knowing. He owns the airline. He stepped onto the plane like any devoted father, composed and courteous, with two eager children beside him. However, as he attempted to take a seat next to them in first class, the flight attendant abruptly halted him. Without verifying his ticket or asking any questions, she made an assumption in front of his kids and directed him to the back of the plane. What she failed to recognize was that the man she had just embarrassed was the quiet strength behind the very airline she served. By the time the flight reached its destination, her career and perception of authority would be irrevocably altered. Before we dive into the story, please share where you're tuning in from today in the comments. If you enjoy tales like this, remember to subscribe and activate the bell icon so you won't miss the next one. The gate area was alive with the familiar sounds of boarding announcements, rolling suitcases, and the chatter of the crowd. Among them stood a tall black man named Andre, holding the small hands of his two children. His son Ethan, aged 8, and his daughter Zoe, just 6, were both dressed smartly in matching travel hoodies and sneakers. With backpacks draped over their shoulders, Andre donned a gray blazer, jeans, and a serene expression. He wasn't one to draw attention. He didn't have to be. Their boarding passes clearly indicated first-class seats 2A, 2B, 2C. Andre had arranged the reservations himself weeks in advance, ensuring every detail was meticulously confirmed. This wasn't merely a trip. It was a rare weekend getaway with his children after a challenging few months, a chance to disconnect, be fully engaged, and create lasting memories without distractions. As they boarded the plane, Ethan and Zoe hurried ahead to explore. Their seats buzzed with excitement as Andre smiled gently, trailing behind them. He carefully stowed their bags in the overhead bin, assisted them with their seat belts, tucked in the complimentary blankets, and settled into 2C beside them. Zoe giggled about the warm towel the attendant had given her earlier, while Ethan eagerly explored the entertainment screen, his eyes wide with wonder. Andre surveyed the first-class cabin, noting that most passengers had yet to board. The atmosphere felt calm for a brief moment until the sound of heels approached. Denise, a flight attendant in white, entered the scene. She walked down the aisle with a practiced smile, nodding at passengers and double-checking seat assignments. However, when her gaze fell on Andre and his children, her demeanor changed. The warmth disappeared, her pace slowed, and she halted beside them. "Good evening," she said, a touch too formal. Her eyes flicked from Zoe to Ethan before settling on Andre. "Are you sitting with them?" Andre looked up. "Yes, I'm their father." Denise blinked and quickly checked her manifest. "I see tickets for 2A and 2B, but not for 2C. Andre calmly pulled out his boarding pass and handed it to her. As always, she scanned the information and frowned. "This seat wasn't originally booked under your name. Were you upgraded at the counter?" Andre shook his head. "No, I booked all 3 seats together 3 weeks ago." Denise didn't reply. Instead, she glanced at her tablet and then back at the kids. "I'm going to confirm this with the gate agent. Please stay here until I return." She turned and walked away quickly. Andre let out a slow breath. Zoe leaned in closer and whispered, "Why did she ask if you're sitting with us?" Ethan looked anxious now. "Are we in trouble?" Offered a soft smile, but he sensed something was amiss. Denise hadn't inquired about anyone else. She hadn't even glanced at the man in 1D or the couple in 3A and 3B. Only him, only them. He understood the direction this was taking, and he realized this flight would be different. A few minutes later, Denise returned, her tablet firmly grasped in one hand, her demeanor steely. It was the kind of expression someone wears when they've already reached a conclusion, regardless of the evidence at hand. "I've confirmed with the gate agent stated rigidly. "It seems there has been a mistake in the system. This seat has been reassigned during check-in, and we need you to move to the economy cabin." Andre remained still. "Excuse me." Denise maintained her calm demeanor, though her tone became more pointed. "Your children may remain here, but your ticket does not reflect the current first-class seating. I am asking you to relocate to your assigned economy seat so we can finish boarding." Andre leaned back, his gaze unwavering. "I did not request a reassignment. No one informed me, and this seat was confirmed in my reservation." Denise signaled to another crew member in the galley. It's a straightforward request, sir. Let's avoid any drama. Zoe's eyes widened, and Ethan looked up in disbelief. But why can't he sit with us? Andre glanced down at them and then back at Denise. My children are minors. They're not flying alone. You'll still be on the same flight, she replied. We'll seat you nearby. I'm their legal guardian, and I'm not leaving them alone in a separate cabin. Denise let out a short breath, clearly losing her patience. Sir, I'm not going to argue. Please gather your belongings and move to the back. Andre stood up slowly, maintaining a steady tone. He reached for his blazer and retrieved his ticket from the pocket, holding it up between two fingers, composed as always. I want you to take another look, he said, but Denise didn't even glance at it. Sir, please comply, or I'll be forced to escalate this further. The younger flight attendant, Emily Parker, shifted uncomfortably behind her, glancing at the children. Her voice was soft. Should we double-check the manifest again? Denise shot her a sharp look. It's already been checked. The passengers in rows 1 and 3 had now shifted their attention to the unfolding scene. A few removed their earbuds while others exchanged hushed whispers. Yet no one stepped in to help or spoke up. Andre turned back to Ethan and Zoe, saying softly, I'll be right back, as he placed a reassuring hand on each of their shoulders. Don't worry. Without another word, he picked up his carry-on and made his way to the back of the plane. Emily Parker glanced down at the children, clearly troubled, but Denise simply turned and strode back toward the galley as if it were just another task to complete, unaware of the gravity of the situation. Although he hadn't fully processed it yet, this issue had transformed everything. Andre took his place in the cramped economy seat, distanced from his children. The cabin felt colder, noisier, and less intimate. He remained still for a moment, gazing at the back of the seat in front of him, breathing slowly through his nose. Passengers moved past him with backpacks and snacks, unaware of the events that had just unfolded a few rows ahead. He reached into his pocket and retrieved his phone, the screen illuminating with a message from his assistant confirming a boardroom appointment that was set for later that week. Andre chose to disregard it. Instead, he opened a new message and typed swiftly, They just removed me from my seat, said my ticket wasn't valid. Kids are still in first class. He hit send, and within seconds, a reply appeared. What? Which flight? Andre typed the flight number, his jaw clenched, fingers steady. Flight 684, headed to LAX. After a brief pause, he received a response. Stay put, I'll take care of it. Andre locked the screen and set the phone face down on the tray table. He felt no worry, not even a hint. He had built his life on maintaining composure amidst chaos, and at that moment, he was unfazed. I had a feeling this situation was about to escalate quickly. Meanwhile, in the first-class cabin, Ethan kept stealing glances down the aisle, his expression tight with anxiety. Zoe shifted restlessly in her seat, her hands still hidden beneath the blanket their father had given her. Emily Parker, the younger flight attendant, approached them quietly, crouching to meet their gaze. Are you both okay? She asked softly. Zoe nodded slowly, her brow furrowed. Why did that lady make our dad leave? Emily Parker paused, sensing a misunderstanding, but reassured them, everything's going to be fine. Ethan looked at her, searching for reassurance. He hadn't done anything wrong, and Emily Parker found herself at a loss for words because he was right. In the galley, Denise leaned against the counter, sipping her coffee as if nothing was amiss. A junior attendant passed by and inquired if she needed assistance, but she dismissed him, stating she was just managing another seating mix-up. Such things occurred frequently, but this was no ordinary mix-up. Meanwhile, in the cockpit, the captain had just received a priority message from ground control, prompting his co-pilot to raise an eyebrow as the screen flickered twice. It appears we have an incoming call from the corporate operations line. The captain answered the in-flight phone, listening as the connection established. A calm, authoritative voice spoke. Captain, we've received a call from Mr. Marcus Carter, a passenger in seat 2C. Yes, sir, the captain replied. That passenger is the primary shareholder and owner of this airline. He has just been moved to economy. The captain's expression changed. What had initially seemed like an ordinary flight had suddenly escalated into something far more significant. Denise was unaware. observed the change occurring just a short distance away. She was preoccupied with arranging the drink carts, humming to herself as if she hadn't just embarrassed a father in front of his kids. To her, it was all part of the job. Occasionally, passengers attempted to sneak upgrades, and sometimes the system malfunctioned. She didn't linger on it. Meanwhile, in the cockpit, the captain turned away from the in-flight phone, his expression tense. He glanced at his co-pilot and said quietly, "That man back there, the one she pushed into economy, he's the owner." The co-pilot blinked in disbelief. "You're kidding." "Nope, and corporate wants it resolved immediately before we even leave the runway." The captain flipped the intercom switch and spoke calmly into the speaker. "Flight attendant Denise, please report to the cockpit immediately." Back in the galley, Denise froze mid-sip, looking up in confusion. It wasn't common to be summoned like that before takeoff. She set the cup down and smoothed her uniform, glancing at Emily Parker as she made her way up the aisle. "Hold the front," she muttered, and Emily Parker nodded in response. As Denise entered the cockpit, she immediately sensed a chill in the air. The captain turned to face her, his expression inscrutable. "Miss Denise," he stated with authority, "we've just been informed by operations that there's a significant problem concerning passenger Marcus Carter." She nodded, still unclear about the situation. "Yes, I had to relocate him from first class due to a ticket discrepancy." The captain raised his hand. There was a pause as she stopped speaking. "The man you removed is Marcus Carter. He's the majority owner of this airline." Denise stared at him, the words not registering for a moment. The captain continued, "You are to escort Mr. Beckett back to his original seat immediately, apologize in front of the cabin and his children, and once we land, you will file a written report with the executive board." The blood drained from Denise's face. I didn't know." "That's the problem," the captain interjected. "You didn't ask. You assumed." Opened slightly before shutting once more. "Fix it," he said flatly. Denise's face drained of color, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for the cockpit door. She stepped back into the cabin, her heart racing. Passengers glanced up as she walked by, some with curiosity, others with suspicion. She sensed their gazes following her down the aisle, each step feeling heavier. At the back of the plane, Andre sat calmly, flipping through the safety card, his phone resting quietly on his tray. He looked up when he noticed her. Denise paused beside him, with a courteous smile. "Mr. Beckett, there seems to be a misunderstanding. I would like to guide you back to your seat in first class." Andre hesitated for a moment, studying her with a long, silent gaze. Finally, he nodded slowly and rose to his feet. The silence that enveloped the cabin as he followed her to the front was more pronounced than any spoken words. As Andre re-entered the first-class section, a hush descended over the seats. Conversations halted, earbuds were removed, and phones were discreetly angled. Everyone was aware of the unfolding situation, and more importantly, who it involved. Ethan's expression brightened. The instant he spotted his father, he exclaimed, "Dad!" already unbuckling his seatbelt. Andre offered him a small, steady nod, reassuring him. Zoe held her stuffed panda tightly, her eyes wide as she observed her father's return. Though she remained silent, her grip on the toy eased a bit. Denise, taking a step ahead of Andre, appeared as if she were walking toward her own sentencing. She halted near the three seats and turned to face him, her posture rigid and mechanical. The words stuck in her throat. She was unaccustomed to this situation. "I apologize," she said, struggling to get the words out. "There was an error on my part regarding your seating assignment." Andre didn't reply immediately. He studied her calm, unreadable expression, and the silence spoke volumes. Emily Parker stood off to the side, her gaze shifting between Denise and the children, clearly wanting to say something but recognizing that this wasn't her time to intervene. Denise inhaled deeply, her voice softer now. "It was a mistake. I'm sorry for how I handled the situation." Andre nodded. He turned to his kids and said softly, "Scoot over." Ethan moved toward the window and Andre settled back into his seat, adjusting his tray and folding his coat neatly on his lap. Zoe looked up at him with a smile. "Can we watch the movie now?" she asked. "Yeah, sweetheart," he replied. "Go ahead." Denise stood there, uncertain whether to speak again. No one instructed her to leave or to remain. She glanced at the other passengers, most observing her with a blend of silent judgment and remorse. Some quickly averted their gaze when she met their eyes, while others showed no pretense. Gradually, she stepped back and headed toward the galley. Her shoes felt quieter now, yet each step resonated in her ears. As she walked past Emily Parker, the younger attendant's expression was unmasked. Her eyes narrowed slightly, and her voice was low but resolute. "You didn't even check his name, did you?" Denise paused, glancing at her but remaining silent. Emily Parker shook her head. "You just looked at him and made an assumption." Denise's lips parted as if to respond, but no words came out. She turned back toward the galley without saying anything further. Meanwhile, in seat 2C, Andre sat with his hands folded, staring at the small screen in front of him without hitting play. He hadn't said much. There was no need, as the silence conveyed more than any outburst could. He leaned back, casting a glance at his children, and saw Ethan already laughing at Zoe, immersed in her cartoon, with headphones on, swung her legs gently beneath her seat. For the moment, everything seemed fine, but Andre sensed a shift, and so did the other passengers on the plane. Even before takeoff, the mood in first class had transformed entirely. What had been a serene and cozy environment now crackled with unspoken tension. Passengers averted their gazes. Some fiddled nervously with their seatbelts, while others fixated intently on their screens, trying to ignore the unsettling events that had just transpired. Andre remained seated. With his arms still crossed and his gaze fixed on the tray before him, he hadn't even touched the welcome drink. His fingers lightly drummed against the armrest, his thoughts drifting away from the plane. Instead, they replayed Denise's voice, her assumptions, her refusal to listen, and the way she spoke in front of his children as if he were an unwelcome intruder in a space they never expected him to occupy. What troubled him most wasn't the content of her words, but the confidence with which she delivered them. Zoe had now leaned against his shoulder, relaxed, clutching her stuffed panda. Ethan, caught between them, had paused his movie and turned slightly to observe his father. "You okay, Dad?" he asked softly. Andre glanced down at him, his expression softening for a brief moment. "Yeah, bud, I'm all right." "Was she mad at you?" Ethan inquired. "No," Andre replied, his calm demeanor contrasting with the turmoil brewing within him. "She was just wrong." Ethan nodded slowly, not entirely grasping the situation, but feeling that there was more beneath the surface. He returned his focus to the screen, though his expression had shifted. Emily Parker approached cautiously, carrying a tray of drinks, her voice soft and respectful. "Can I get you anything, Mr. Beckett? Something for the kids?" Andre looked up and gave her a small nod. "Water for me, juice for them, please." Emily Parker smiled faintly, relieved that he wasn't reacting negatively towards her. "Coming right up." As she walked away, Andre's phone vibrated again. He checked the message and confirmed that the board had been notified. "Senior, operations are monitoring your flight in real time and will follow up upon landing." He slipped the phone back into his pocket, but not before casting one last glance at the sender's name. Robert Hayes, Executive Vice President of Beckett Airways Group. This was far from over. In the galley, Denise leaned against the metal counter, her hands gripping the edge so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Her heart raced, and the captain's voice still echoed in her ears as her mind spun. She had served thousands of passengers over her 12 years. The airlines she interacted with had rude, intoxicated, and even threatening individuals. She had always trusted her instincts and took pride in her strict, no-nonsense professionalism. Yet in this moment, she felt anything but professional. She felt vulnerable. Emily Parker went back to the galley and grabbed drinks from the cooler, remaining silent at first and moving with purpose, her gaze averted from Denise. "Why didn't you scan the ticket?" she finally asked. Denise remained silent. "Seriously," Emily Parker pressed, her tone more cutting this time. "Why didn't you just scan it like you do for everyone else?" Denise replied, "I didn't think I needed to." Emily Parker paused briefly before turning to her. "No, you chose not to." "That's not the same." Denise shot her a sharp glance, but Emily Parker had already turned away, tray in hand, concentrating on her duties in the cockpit. The captain received another alert on his screen. The message was brief. Mr. Beckett is under observation. Ensure he receives full protocol service. Do not leave cabin oversight to Denise. Management decision pending. He leaned back in his seat, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. He murmured to himself, "It seems this flight has turned into a corporate issue." Back in first class, Emily Parker returned with the drinks, setting them down gently on the tray table. "Thank you," Andre said quietly. She nodded in response. "If you need anything else, just let me know." He paused before replying, studying her for a moment before asking, "How long have you been with this airline?" "Almost 2 years," she responded, and Andre offered her a slight nod. "You're doing well." Emily Parker blinked, taken aback by the compliment, then offered a soft smile before stepping away. Zoe tapped her dad's arm, asking, "Can we watch the movie now?" Andre smiled at her, kissed the top of her head, and handed her the headphones. "Yeah, baby girl, go ahead." The plane began to taxi down the runway, the hum of the engines increasing. The seatbelt sign dinged, and somewhere in the back of the cabin, Denise closed her eyes and took a deep breath, realizing that this flight had taken a turn beyond her control, something she had never anticipated. The plane ascended from the runway with a smooth, steady climb, yet tension lingered within the cabin. Passengers leaned into their seats. Some flipped through magazines, while others shut their eyes, feigning sleep. Even as the aircraft attained cruising altitude, the atmosphere in first class remained unsettled. It was an unsettling quiet, one that felt more cautious than serene. Andre sat still, his body at ease, but his mind remained sharp. He had always been composed, maintaining his calm even when those around him lost their grip. That's how he established his business and gained respect. Yet as the clouds drifted quietly outside the window, a storm was brewing within him, not loud or reckless, but slow, patient, and deliberate. He felt no anger for himself. He had encountered individuals like Denise throughout his life, those who greeted you with a smile yet doubted your place. However, seeing his children experience that, witnessing Zoe's expression when the flight attendant made him rise, and Ethan's bewilderment when no one spoke up to challenge the injustice, that was what lingered with him. He tilted his head back and shut his eyes, attempting to ease the heaviness in his chest. It wasn't merely about a single seat. It never had been. A gentle voice interrupted his thoughts. "Excuse me, Mr. Beckett." It was Emily Parker again, kneeling beside him with a note in hand. "This was just handed to me from the cockpit," she said softly. "The captain thought you should see it." Andre picked up the neatly folded note crafted from crisp airline stationery. It read, "Mr. Beckett, corporate operations is monitoring this flight. Upon arrival, our executive team will be waiting at the gate to speak with you directly. We apologize for what occurred and assure you it will be addressed." Captain James Reynolds folded the note carefully and tucked it into his pocket, remaining silent. Emily Parker stood nearby, offering, "Let me know if you need anything." Andre nodded in acknowledgement, replying, "Thank you," as she walked away. At the far end of the aisle, Denise feigned interest in the overhead bins, avoiding eye contact. Since Andre's return, she remained firmly on her side of the cabin, as if an invisible barrier separated them. Whenever a passenger requested something, she relayed it to Emily Parker instead. Her voice had softened, her steps had slowed, and the confidence she usually wore like a badge had vanished. At the back of the plane, the crew whispered, and the galley hummed with hushed conversations. A junior attendant named Josh leaned toward a colleague and murmured, "Did you hear about that guy in 2C?" The other nodded in response. "Can you believe she actually kicked him out?" Josh said it plainly. She's had enough. Even in the economy cabin, news was traveling fast. A tech consultant in row 12 had already texted his friend, "You won't believe what just happened on my flight. The airline owner got sent to the back." The entire plane witnessed it. But Andre wasn't concerned about the repercussions. He was watching his children. Zoe had snuggled up against him, fast asleep, while Ethan was engrossed in a superhero movie, occasionally stealing glances at his dad. She smiled gently at him as Ethan whispered, "She's going to be in a lot of trouble, right?" Andre paused before nodding. "She might." Ethan tilted his head and asked, "Are you going to let her go?" Andre glanced out the window for a moment. "I'm going to ensure she learns from this." "But she was unkind," Ethan said, puzzled. I understand, Andre responded. However, sometimes people are unaware of their unfairness. That's why we don't merely punish. We educate. That's how real change occurs. Ethan nodded slowly, mulling over the words. Denise stood frozen near row 1, observing the way Andre interacted with his children, the quiet authority in his voice, the grace of his presence. She realized she had made a mistake, but what troubled her more was the dawning realization of just how significant that mistake truly was. She had believed her job granted her control, that she had the right to determine who belonged where. But now she understood that she didn't even have a rightful claim to the cabin she thought she governed, and there were still hours left in the flight. It took 26 hours for that truth to settle in. The time in the sky moved at a sluggish pace, but for some, like Denise, it felt excruciatingly slow, akin to a lengthy sentence. She spent the majority of the flight engrossed in trivial tasks, checking tray tables that were already fine, wiping down counters that sparkled, all while pretending to be busy with non-existent duties. Anything to steer clear of the front row, anything to avoid the gaze of the man whose dignity she had tried to undermine in front of his children. Each burst of laughter from seats 2A or 2B pierced her deeper, not because they were ridiculing her. They were not. That would have been simpler, but it was their tranquility that intensified the situation. Andre hadn't elevated his voice, hadn't made any demands, and hadn't even exchanged words with her since she guided him back. Yet the silence resonated more profoundly than any argument could have. Meanwhile, Emily Parker carried on with her responsibilities in first class with a calm diligence. She served snacks, refilled drinks, and monitored Andre's row more than any other. Not because he requested it, he didn't, but because she believed it was the right course of action. She had witnessed the events unfold, and unlike others, understood their impact. Denise found it hard to forget what she had witnessed. During one of her passes, Emily Parker stopped at Andre's seat. Ethan was once again lost in his headphones, and Zoe remained asleep, wrapped in her blanket. Emily Parker leaned in a bit closer and spoke just loud enough for Andre to catch her words. I know it's not my place, sir, but I wanted to express my regret for what happened earlier. Andre looked up at her, momentarily taken aback, then nodded. You didn't do anything wrong. Emily Parker's gaze softened. But I didn't speak up, and I should have. He studied her intently. After a brief pause, she offered a faint smile, a gesture that carried weight as she departed. Denise observed from the galley, her stomach churning. The change in dynamics was unmistakable. The crew had seamlessly adapted without a single word, with Emily Parker quietly assuming control of the first-class cabin, and not a soul dared to challenge it, not even the captain. Denise felt like a mere shadow during her own shift, present yet no longer trusted. She understood that upon landing, there would be inquiries, reports, and evaluations, but it was more profound than that. It was the way no one regarded her the same anymore. Emily Parker no longer sought guidance, and the other crew members avoided her gaze as she walked into the galley. Then there was Andre, sitting with an air of calm, keeping his children close. He didn't react. Instead, he observed, documenting her unraveling. Denise had encountered unruly passengers, entitled CEOs, and rude travelers who believed their wealth granted them authority, but this situation felt distinct. Andre didn't exude entitlement, he radiated confidence, presenting himself as someone who had nothing to prove, was due to the fact that his identity spoke volumes, making the situation at the front of the plane intolerable. The captain received another update on his in-flight terminal, a message from corporate stating that Mr. Beckett's legal counsel had requested the incident footage, specifically from the first-class cabin, to be flagged and archived. He was instructed to confirm the crew's status upon landing and to ensure that Ms. Karen Mitchell was available for an immediate debrief. The captain read the message, let out a sigh through his nose, and glanced at his co-pilot. She's not walking off this plane like any other day, the co-pilot muttered. Back in seat 2C, Andre finally opened his laptop. He didn't have any work to do, but it provided him with a distraction, something to concentrate on as the minutes passed. He glanced down at Zoe, who was still sleeping peacefully with her legs curled up, and then at Ethan, who had removed his headphones and was watching the clouds drift by. Ethan looked over and asked, "Are we almost there?" "Almost," Andre replied, closing his laptop. "A few more minutes." "Will they say sorry to you again when we land?" Andre kept his gaze fixed on the window. "We'll see," he said, though he knew they wouldn't. Not out of desire, but because they were left with no alternatives. At the rear of the plane, Denise finally settled into a jump seat, her gaze locked on the floor, her fingers nervously toying with the hem of her sleeve. She had once thought that her experience granted her authority, that her years in uniform empowered her to make decisions based on instinct. But this was not instinct. It was something far more disturbing, something she was reluctant to label yet could no longer ignore. The entire plane had witnessed her actions, and when the wheels touched down, it would not be forgotten. As the plane began its gradual descent, the captain's voice resonated through the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've begun our approach. Please fasten your seat belts and ensure your tray tables are in their upright positions. We'll be landing shortly." The familiar sounds of rustling filled the air as passengers adjusted themselves, stowed laptops, and finished their drinks. However, in first class, every movement carried attention, an unspoken awareness that something significant was approaching, yet no one was willing to acknowledge it. Andre fastened his belt, gently nudging Ethan, who had begun to doze off. Zoe remained curled against him, undisturbed. He glanced out the window once more. The city lights sparkled like tiny dots far below. He noticed the runway lights blinking ahead, and for the first time since the confrontation, he allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. He hadn't exchanged a word with Denise since being brought back, nor had he filed a complaint or made any calls during the flight. His silence had proven more effective than words ever could, more effective than any shouting could be, and now everything was already unfolding in the galley. Denise remained motionless, the seatbelt across her lap only half fastened, her hands tightly gripping her lap. Her eyes darted upward every few seconds, anticipating the final ding that would signal the end of this flight, this ordeal. But it wouldn't truly be over. Not when the aircraft doors opened. That was when the real repercussions would start. Emily Parker stood at the front of the first-class cabin, completing the final walkthrough, adjusting pillows and making the attendant ensure that the blankets were neatly folded and greeted each passenger with a warm smile. When she approached Andre, she paused and said softly, "If you need assistance at the gate, just let me know, and I'll personally guide you through." Andre shook his head with a slight smile, replying, "I think I've got it covered." Emily Parker returned the smile, recognizing the unspoken meaning behind his calm response, before continuing to the next row. Meanwhile, in the cockpit, the captain's dashboard illuminated with one last incoming message from corporate security for the gate team. Executive staff member Ms. Karen Mitchell was to be detained for an immediate incident review. The captain switched off the alert, glanced down the aisle and sighed. "That's it," he murmured. The wheels made a gentle thud as they touched down, causing a slight jolt in the cabin as the plane slowed to taxi toward the gate. Passengers around Andre began to stir, reaching for their bags, stretching, and whispering, but no one near him spoke. They all recognized him now. They had witnessed the incident, and their silence was no longer ignorance. It was guilt. The seatbelt light. The usual scramble was interrupted, but this time it felt different. Instead of the frantic rush to stand, there was an unusual, hesitant stillness. All eyes subtly shifted to Andre as everyone awaited the next move. Andre remained still, one hand resting on Ethan's shoulder, while the other gently brushed Ma's curls, calm and composed as ever. At the front of the plane, the door swung open, and the atmosphere shifted instantly. Two uniformed security officers entered the jet bridge, followed by a sharply dressed man. A silver name badge identified him as the Director of Flight Operations. His gaze swept across the cabin with meticulous attention. He offered a brief nod to the captain before gesturing toward the galley. "Miss Porter," he called out. Denise rose slowly, her knees rigid and her face ashen. "Yes, you'll need to step off with us now." Passengers gasped. Some feigned indifference, yet their eyes tracked her every movement. Others exchanged glances between Andre and the front, but silence reigned. Emily Parker, now positioned near the door, stepped aside. Denise struggled to maintain her composure, her hands shaking. She remained silent, offering no resistance, and simply followed them off the plane, each step feeling heavier than the last. As she passed Andre's row, she dared to steal a glance his way, but he didn't return it. He was busy helping Zoe sit up, whispering to Ethan, and smoothing a wrinkle from his daughter's clothing. His attention remained steadfastly on his children, and that quiet dismissal struck deeper than any argument could. Denise exited the plane and entered the terminal, the doors hissing shut behind her. Inside the cabin, passengers began to rise. Some looked at Andre with a hint of recognition, a few offered subtle nods, and one man passed by with a low, respectful, "Sir." Emily Parker returned to Andre's row, crouching slightly to meet his gaze. "Would you like me to help you off?" Andre bent down to pick up Zoe's bag and offered Ethan a polite, "No, thank you." He said it softly. "We're good." Taking one child's hand in each of his, he stepped into the aisle. The first-class cabin parted for them in silence, and as they moved forward, calm and steady, every person on that plane understood that what had just occurred was not merely about a seat. It was about every instance when someone like Denise believed they had the authority to determine who belonged. This time, they had chosen the wrong man. The terminal was unusually quiet for that hour of the day. The silence was unrelated to flight schedules. It resembled the stillness that follows a storm, a heavy pause after a wave has crashed and altered the shoreline permanently. A few airline staff near the gate maintained their focus on the jet bridge, standing more rigidly than usual, aware that executives were on their way. A passenger had been wronged, and not just any passenger. Andre emerged from the plane with his children beside him, one in each hand. His stride was steady and unhurried, his demeanor composed, yet indecipherable. He wasn't seeking an audience. Yet the terminal provided one nonetheless. Gate agents paused. A ground staff supervisor straightened her badge and offered a subtle nod of recognition. Uniformed security restrained a handful of intrigued bystanders. The operations man, the one who had taken Denise away, approached Andre with a mix of respect and caution. "Mr. Beckett," he said, extending his hand, "welcome home. If you permit us, we have a private lounge ready for you and your children while the review commences." Andre glanced at Ethan, then at Zoe. Her sleepy eyes now wide open, asked, "Is that all right with you two?" Ethan shrugged and replied, "Can I get snacks?" The executive smiled, already directing his attention to his team. "Absolutely, anything you need." Andre nodded once and led the way as they were escorted to a nearby lounge. The terminal buzzed behind them, with a few passengers from the same flight murmuring among themselves. "Was that the guy?" "Yeah, the flight attendant kicked him to economy. He owns the airline." "No way, I saw the whole thing. She didn't even check his ticket in the private suite." Ethan and Zoe were already engrossed in the snacks and comfortable couches, while a kind hostess offered them juice boxes and a tablet filled with games. Meanwhile, Andre stood off to the side, conversing quietly with the director of operations near the far wall. "We are initiating a comprehensive internal investigation," the man stated, "and the CEO will be contacting you personally within the hour. We take this matter very seriously." Andre raised an eyebrow. "You think she still doesn't know who I am?" The executive cleared his throat. "She knows now. We've suspended her pending review. It's improbable that she'll don that uniform again." Andre nodded slowly. "It's not about the uniform," he stated. "It's about what led her to believe she had the authority to decide I didn't belong. That doesn't stem from training. It arises from culture." The executive remained silent, unable to offer any defense. Andre pressed on. "If you want to address this, don't merely dismiss one individual. Rectify the system that empowered her to behave that way." "We will," the man replied softly, "and we would appreciate your insights." Andre turned his head, glancing over at Zoe. A woman giggling as she showed Ethan something on her tablet caught his attention. He turned back, saying, "I'll send you a list." The executive nodded, visibly relieved. Just then, the lounge doors swung open, and a sharply dressed woman stepped in, accompanied by a corporate assistant. "Mr. Beckett," she said, approaching with her hand extended, "on behalf of the board, I want to personally apologize for what happened. It was unacceptable." Andre shook her hand, but his expression remained unchanged. It was predictable, he stated plainly. She blinked. Excuse me, I never claimed it was shocking, he responded. Just predictable. People don't anticipate me sitting in first class with my children. That's the core issue. The assistant behind her typed rapidly, attempting to document every word, but Andre was indifferent to who was listening now. He had spent years remaining silent, allowing things to pass without comment, but not anymore. The woman regained her poise. We are instituting new bias training protocols across all divisions, immediate retraining. We are also reassessing all first-class protocols and enhancing oversight for ticket verification. Practices. Andre gave her a slow nod. Start with accountability, then work your way to awareness. She nodded quickly, understanding. The assistant leaned forward. Would you be willing to share your story publicly? Andre didn't hesitate. If it helps someone else get treated better, yes. Zoe tugged at his hand. Dad, can we go home now? He smiled down at her and crouched to her level. Just a few more minutes, baby girl. She nodded and then ran back to the couch where Ethan was now building something with digital blocks on the tablet. Andre stood back up. I don't require any more apologies, he told the executives. What I need is improved standards. Achieve that, and I won't have to travel on edge. The woman nodded again, this time more deliberately. We understand you. Andre glanced at her one last time. Good, because if you didn't, this wouldn't be a private conversation. He then turned and walked back to his children, as they were the reason for his presence. Not to be right or to make a statement, but to ensure that the next time someone saw a black father flying first class with his kids, there would be no questions raised. Observe a family. Nothing more, nothing less. This time the system would retain its memory. Far from the polished glass of the executive lounge, in a back office hidden behind a restricted corridor, Denise sat alone, her shoulders tense, her gaze fixed on the corner of the room where the wall met the floor. Her uniform, once a symbol of confidence, now felt alien to her. Her badge was gone, her crew ID deactivated. She had been escorted away from the gate, not with handcuffs or shouts, but in silence, and somehow that silence felt even more profound. The room was cramped, with a frosted window revealing nothing but a hallway. In front of her lay a blank incident report form and a cold cup of coffee. No one had spoken to her for 15 minutes, leaving her alone with her thoughts, which was precisely what she had begun to dread. At last, the door swung open, and a man in a charcoal gray suit stepped in. His expression was professional, yet devoid of warmth. He offered no greeting, placing a folder on the table before taking a seat across from her. Miss Porter, he began without any introduction. Before we proceed, I need you to recognize that this is a formal investigation. Your statements here will influence whether disciplinary measures will progress beyond suspension. Denise gave a slight nod, her voice hoarse when she spoke. I understand. He opened the folder and pulled out a printed manifest. You removed a passenger from seat 2C, is that correct? She swallowed hard. Yes. He looked up. Did you verify the passenger's name against the manifest before removing him? Denise hesitated. I checked the first 2 tickets, the children. When I saw their guardian, I didn't anticipate that. You were surprised to see a black father in first class. He completed her thought, his tone emotionless. Denise remained silent. He went on. You informed the passenger that his seat had been reassigned, but our system indicates there was no reassignment. The original booking was made under the name of Marcus Carter, along with his 2 children. I thought, she began, then hesitated. I didn't recognize the name. You didn't have to recognize the name, he responded. You needed to read it. She glanced down at her hands, her nails bitten and the skin around them red and raw from anxiety. He leaned back. Do you know how many employees report to Mr. Beckett's division of the airline? Denise shook her head. Over 6,000, he said. He built this airline. He didn't inherit it, didn't marry into it, didn't buy it through connections. He created it from the ground up, flight by flight, deal by deal. He continues to fly commercial as he values the experience of the service he created. She shut her eyes, a surge of shame swelling in her throat. The investigator paused, allowing the gravity of his words to sink in. You didn't merely insult a passenger, Miss Porter. You disrespected the man who signs half the paychecks for this building. She felt the urge to explain, to express her fatigue, to mention the long week and the countless attempts she'd witnessed of people trying to sneak into first class. Yet she understood that none of that would matter, would be significant because the reality was more disturbing. She hadn't truly examined the ticket. She had noticed a black man seated next to two black children in first class and had assumed something was amiss. So she adjusted the situation by excluding him. The investigator collected the documents and stood up. You will be contacted by the Disciplinary Review Board within 48 hours. Until then, you are on unpaid suspension. You are not to report for duty, enter any employee areas, or speak publicly about this incident. She nodded slowly, feeling numb. Am I fired? He hesitated at that's not for me to decide, and he said, but I wouldn't get your hopes up. With that, he left. Denise stayed seated, unmoving in that cold little room, and for the first time in her career, she experienced the same feelings she had once imposed on Andre in front of the entire cabin. Small, exposed, and out of place. Meanwhile, back in the executive lounge, Andre sat with his kids, enjoying their laughter over a silly video Zoe had found. Ethan had somehow persuaded one of the staff to bring cookies, leaving crumbs scattered across the coffee table. For a brief moment, everything felt normal, as if nothing had transpired just hours earlier. Yet Andre understood that this was not merely a tale to be forgotten. It was an experience that Zoe might recall the next time she stepped onto a plane, glancing around and questioning why others were watching her. It was a thought that could cross Ethan's mind when he encountered someone in uniform, pondering whether that individual would address his father with honor or doubt. Andre glanced at his phone. The message he had anticipated had finally come through. Karen Mitchell suspended, board initiating a complete training overhaul. Would you be willing to... As he assisted us in the design, he read the message twice before responding. Yes, but only if it's genuine. No checkbox training, no PR fixes. If you want my help, it must lead to real change. The reply came almost instantly, and he understood. Let's make it real. Andre slid his phone back into his pocket. He wasn't seeking revenge. He never had been. However, he was finished with accepting apologies that lacked action. If this initiative changed even one perspective, or prevented another father from feeling diminished in front of his children, then it was worth it. Zoe tugged on his. Daddy, can we go home now? She asked, her arms reaching out. He smiled and replied, Yeah, baby girl, let's go. As they exited the lounge, Andre didn't glance back, and this time, no one questioned his place because they understood. Outside the airport, the cool, clear evening air greeted them, with city lights twinkling in the distance and the soft hum of traffic providing a gentle backdrop to the thoughts swirling in Andre's mind. He slid into the back seat of a waiting car, holding the door for Ethan and Zoe as they joined him. The driver nodded in acknowledgement. The car pulled away from the curb in silence, the atmosphere initially subdued. Ethan leaned against the window, observing the flickering streetlights, while Zoe rested her head on Andre's arm, clutching her panda tightly. Andre sat with his hands folded in his lap, staring straight ahead, his eyes heavy, not from tiredness, but from contemplation. He had just spent several hours fielding questions, engaging with executives, and hearing terms like accountability, policy review, and training reform. They had presented him with everything: statements, follow-ups, and apologies from the top. He was even asked if he would be open to giving a speech at the upcoming employee conference. He smiled politely and suggested they could put it in writing. However, now that he was away from the cameras, the lights, and the formal apologies, what lingered in his mind wasn't corporate damage control, it was his children. Zoe lifted her head and asked, Daddy, is that lady going to be mean to other people too? Andre paused before responding. I don't think she'll get the chance to do that again. Zoe considered this for a moment and then nodded. Good. Ethan turned away from the window, questioning why. Didn't you raise your voice at her if she was mistaken? Andre met his son's gaze in the rearview mirror. Yelling doesn't transform someone's heart, son. It's about demonstrating their error without compromising your own dignity. That's what truly resonates. Ethan looked down, silent. Andre continued. If I had shouted, she would have claimed I was furious. If I had caused a scene, she would have used it to argue that I didn't fit in. But by remaining composed, she had no ammunition. Everyone noticed Ethan nodding slowly, taking in the lesson. They continued to ride in silence for a few more minutes until Zoe whispered, "I'm glad you sat with us again." Andre smiled and drew her closer, replying, "Me too." Meanwhile, in another part of the city, Denise sat alone in her apartment, staring at a darkened screen. Her phone buzzed once from an unknown number, but she didn't answer. It buzzed again with a notification from a private airline employee forum where her name was trending. She clicked on the thread out of instinct and instantly regretted it, seeing screenshots of the incident. A passenger quoted someone who had recorded her confrontation with Andre. The video had already gone viral. The flight attendant confronted the airline owner, and the clip was being shared across various platforms. The comment hit hard. She genuinely believed she could dictate where the CEO should sit. By the end of the week, the repercussions of the flight had extended far beyond anyone's expectations. It began with a press release, brief, straightforward, yet undeniably assertive. The airline publicly recognized the incident involving a high-ranking passenger who was unjustly removed from his designated seat, announced a zero-tolerance review of discriminatory behavior. But it wasn't the statement that drew attention. It was what followed. Marcus Carter took the mic at the company's emergency leadership town hall. He hadn't intended to speak, nor did he seek cameras or applause. But when the board requested he address the top 200 managers from across the company, he realized this was no longer merely about a public apology. It was about the potential transformation of the culture that necessitated the apology. He stood at the front of a modern conference room, dressed casually, dressed in a jacket with no tie and a button-down shirt, sleeves rolled to his forearms. He stood before a room filled with executives, HR leaders, and training officers. Some appeared anxious, while others busily took notes before he even began to speak. Andre addressed them without any dramatics. His voice was calm and measured. "I want to clarify something from the outset," he stated. "This isn't about punishing a single flight attendant. It's about understanding what led her to believe she could act as she did and why the rest of the crew felt unable to intervene." A subtle wave of tension passed through the room. As I navigated the room, my experience in corporate boardrooms has taught me to recognize this phenomenon. We label it unconscious bias or a deficiency in training, but I won't dilute the reality. It was judgment, it was assumption, and it was directed at someone who seemed out of place in first class. He allowed the silence to linger before he spoke again. "I'm not angry with Karen Mitchell," he remarked. "She didn't raise her voice or shout. She maintained her composure and professionalism. Yet therein lies the issue, doesn't it? She adhered to a certain narrative of professionalism was instilled in her, a lesson that emphasized, question what seems unfamiliar, safeguard the cabin's image, uphold order, even if it means shaming an innocent." He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle. "I don't seek your sympathy. I demand a shift in your structure." Whispers circulated among the rows, yet no one interrupted as Andre continued. "You've sent me numerous drafts for your new bias and belonging initiative. Most were well-crafted and safe, but none conveyed what passengers like me truly need to hear." He reached for the printed proposal on the podium and raised it high. This version, unlike the previous one, focused not only on correcting behavior, but also on fostering awareness, retraining instincts, and empowering crew members like Emily Parker, who witnessed the situation but felt she lacked the authority to voice her concerns. He placed the paper down, declaring, "That's the version I'm supporting." Heads began to nod in agreement around the room, and for anyone questioning whether this is merely a PR strategy, it is not. It represents a fundamental operational change, as we cannot afford another moment like this. He stepped back from the podium, his voice steady. "I'm not asking for perfection. I'm asking for accountability. If you can commit to that, I'll support this airline. If not, I'll seek someone who can." As he took his seat, the room fell silent for a moment before genuine applause erupted. Not the obligatory kind, but the kind that resonated with those who had been stirred from complacency. That same afternoon, flight crews nationwide received alerts from the airline's internal platform regarding mandatory bias. Recognition and conflict escalation training starts on Monday, and all staff are required to complete certification before their next assignment. For the first time in the company's history, the training will not consist solely of online modules and checkbox questions. It will feature real scenarios, recordings, anonymous passenger testimonies, and even a live session moderated by Andre himself. The atmosphere was distinct, urgent, serious, and authentic. Meanwhile, Denise found herself in the office of a third-party mediation counselor assigned to her case, remaining mostly silent since her arrival. Sat with her hands resting in her lap, her shoulders slightly hunched as if to occupy less space. The woman across from her, a middle-aged mediator with kind yet resolute eyes, waited patiently. "You read the internal report?" the woman asked gently. Denise nodded. "And what did you feel while reading it?" There was a long pause before Denise spoke slowly and truthfully. "Shame." The counselor allowed her the space to continue. "I didn't just embarrass him," Denise added, her eyes starting to well up. "I taught his kids something about the world they didn't deserve to learn, and I did it with a smile graced my face as I fulfilled my duties." The room was silent as I replayed the video repeatedly. She mentioned he was calm and respectful, even attempting to show me his ticket. But I chose to focus on him instead and concluded he didn't belong there. She looked up, tears welling in her eyes. After 12 years of flying, I believed I was fair. Strict, perhaps, but fair. Now I realize I wasn't being fair. I was being familiar, and anything that seemed unfamiliar I perceived as a threat. The counselor nodded, acknowledging my realization. Denise exhaled shakily, expressing her lack of expectations. "I want to regain my job, but I refuse to walk away as if I haven't made mistakes. The counselor advised me to learn from my actions, take responsibility, and make a change." Denise nodded slowly, this time expressing her desire to apologize to him. She whispered, "I want to apologize as a person, not just as a flight attendant." The counselor reminded her that she had already done so, but Denise insisted that it felt more like a formality. Meanwhile, back at home, Andre sat at his kitchen counter, watching his kids playfully chase each other across the living room. The atmosphere was filled with laughter, the sound of toys clattering, and a gentle hum of activity. The evening news played softly in the background as his phone buzzed with an email from Karen Mitchell. The subject read, "Request to apologize. Mr. Beckett, you don't owe me your time, but I wanted to express something unscripted, not meant for the airline or a report. What I did on that flight wasn't a mistake, it was a choice, one that stemmed from assumptions I've never had to confront until now. You didn't humiliate me, I did that to myself. You demonstrated restraint, dignity, and control in a situation where I gave you every reason not to. I didn't merely misjudge your ticket, I misjudged your humanity. While I don't expect forgiveness, I want you to understand that you've impacted me, not through anger, but by your example. For that, I am genuinely sorry. Denise." Andre read the email quietly, his expression unchanged as he focused on the screen for a moment, allowing the words to resonate. Then he typed, "I accept your apology, and I hope you never stop examining a Beckett." He pressed send, then walked into the living room and lifted Zoe, twirling her around until her laughter filled the air. Ultimately, the most satisfying form of revenge wasn't in punishment, but in nurturing children in a world that recognized the respect their father deserved. This was merely the start. 2 months had elapsed since the flight. What began as a private embarrassment had evolved into something far more significant, an inflection point for the airline industry and a cultural transformation within Beckett Air. Yet for Andre, it was never about media attention or trends. It wasn't just about headlines or viral think pieces. It was something more profound and subtle. He could now perceive it in the way his children regarded him, not only with love, but with a deeper understanding. They had witnessed experiences that many kids their age had never encountered, their father being questioned, sidelined, and unjustly dismissed. They also observed how he chose to respond, with composure, clarity, and now with purpose. Inside Beckett Air's newly rebranded Equity and Culture office, a team of 10 gathered around a long glass table, finalizing the rollout. Of the initiative now referred to as Cabin Culture, belonging at 30,000 feet, was the culmination of weeks of relentless effort, including policy revisions, scenario-based training, real passenger interviews, and a thorough revision of the flight attendant code of conduct. At the head of the table was Andre, not in CEO mode but in mentor mode, his sleeves rolled up, a half-drunk coffee beside a pile of printed feedback from the trial modules. Across from him sat Emily Parker, invited to join the team not as a mere token gesture, but for her valuable contributions. About how she demonstrated quiet courage in a significant moment. We have buy-in from 97% of the current staff. One of the directors mentioned that even legacy crew members, whom we expected to resist, have embraced it. Andre nodded, and regarding the passengers, we've started showing a condensed version of the values video during boarding. The director noted that positive responses have tripled, leading to fewer confrontations and increased empathy. Emily Parker smiled, as a few attendants even remarked that it helped them reconsider their approach to welcoming people, not just managing them. Andre turned to her. What matters most? She tilted her head. Do you ever regret not revealing your name when this all began? Andre paused to reflect. The story wasn't about me. It was about the system. Emily Parker hesitated before asking, do you think she meant it? The apology, Andre said, glancing at his notes. I believe she meant it at that moment. Whether she still feels that way today, I can't say. It's not my responsibility to continually assess her growth. That's for her to handle now. Emily Parker's respect for him deepened at that moment when Andre's assistant entered the room, presenting him with a sealed envelope. This came from HR, she said. You're mentioned in the case summary. He opened it and read the first line. Final determination, Ms. Karen Mitchell's resignation accepted in lieu of termination. Attached was a handwritten letter, the last he would ever receive from her. Mr. Beckett, I wanted you to know I've stepped down from my role not because I was told to, but because I realized I had outgrown the person I thought I was. You gave me something I never realized how much I needed a mirror. I've signed up for a program focused on racial dynamics and workplace structures. I'm collaborating with a nonprofit that trains customer service professionals on implicit bias. My motivation isn't to reclaim a title. It's because when your children looked at you that day, I recognized something unfamiliar within myself. Integrity. I'm striving to cultivate that now. Thank you, Denise. Andre gazed at the letter for an extended period before carefully folding it and placing it in the drawer next to him. He felt no need to keep it out. It didn't have to be a symbol. Its worth lay in its intention, and that was sufficient. That evening, he returned home just before sunset. Zoe and Ethan were in the backyard, their feet covered in grass, laughing as they chased the family dog. He observed them through the kitchen window for a moment, allowing the tranquility to envelop him. When he stepped outside, they rushed to him immediately. Dad, Zoe made a fort. It's awful, she chuckled. It's not, he replied with a laugh, kneeling down to join them. It's fantastic. As they crawled into the wobbly tent made of bed sheets and sticks, Zoe inquired, Did you sort out the airplane issue? Andre smiled. I believe I made a difference. Ethan leaned in. Is she still employed there? Andre shook his head. No, but she's attempting to learn from the experience. Zoe inquired, Did she apologize again? Andre nodded. Yes, and I feel this time it was sincere. The kids nodded in agreement, then returned to stacking pillows. Andre reclined on the grass, gazing at the sky. In the evening sky, he had dedicated his life to securing his place at every table, demonstrating his right to be in every room. Yet now he was creating something new, not just for himself, but for every parent who wished to shield their child from the stares of others. The transformation wasn't found in a press release. It resided in the nuances of voices, the pause before judgment, in the silent gap between assumption and action. In that space, there emerged a chance to breathe, to belong, and to flourish. For Marcus Carter, this was the legacy that truly mattered. 6 months later, the airport appeared altered, though not in the way that most would perceive. The terminal remained lively with travelers and the sounds of intercom announcements. Children still held their boarding passes with sticky fingers. Couples exchanged farewells at security, and business travelers hurried from one gate to another. However, beneath this familiar scene, A significant transformation had taken place. Beckett Air's cabin culture initiative had subtly yet powerfully redefined the essence of the company, not through flashy advertisements or publicity stunts, but through intentional actions. The transformation went beyond mere training videos or HR slogans. It lay in the nuances. Crew members learned to observe not just with their eyes, but with understanding. And uniforms now embodied a code of empathy woven into the fabric of service. This shift was evident in every greeting, every sincere apology that felt genuine. And in those moments when someone paused to reconsider a ticket, thinking, "Let me inquire rather than presume," Marcus Carter found himself once more in Terminal C, but this time not as a traveler or a quiet onlooker. He was a father bidding farewell to his children. Ethan and Zoe, now slightly taller and more boisterous, were preparing for their inaugural flight without him to visit their grandmother for the weekend. He meticulously arranged every detail, personally checked the tickets, and selected the staff. Not out of distrust in the system, but because he had finally come to believe in it while still acknowledging the weight of history. At the gate, they embraced him, giggling and sharing whispers about the snacks they hoped to find. He held on a bit tighter than usual, aware of the world beyond and its past. "Don't talk to strangers," he advised. Ethan grinned. "We'll only talk to flight attendants." "And only the nice ones," Zoe chimed in with playful seriousness. They both laughed. The gate agent, an older white gentleman with kind eyes, approached and extended his hand to Ethan. "I'll take good care of them, sir." Andre glanced at him for a moment before nodding, understanding. As the children made their way toward the jet bridge, Zoe turned back for one final wave. Andre returned the gesture, then slowly lowered his hand. He remained still for a moment, watching the small plane vanish beyond the window. His reflection in the glass appeared calm and centered. He had constructed many things in his life, a business, a legacy, a name. But what he was creating now ran deeper. It represented a future behind him, as a young black father checked in with his wife and their toddler. Squealed with delight as they received 3 first-class boarding passes. The attendant's smile was genuine, not merely polite, and Andre noticed it, returning the smile. He stepped away from the window and merged with the crowd of travelers, just another man in the airport. For the first time in ages, he felt no need to validate his presence. As he walked, a small headline at a newsstand caught his attention. From turbulence to transformation, how a single flight altered an airline. Below it, a small photo of him and his children from that notorious flight, laughing together, oblivious to the moment being recorded. He didn't pause to retrieve it. It was no longer a story in the paper. Instead, it lived on in every heartfelt greeting, every humble apology, every instance where someone opted for fairness over fear, and in every child who matured believing their seat, no matter where it was rightfully theirs without doubt as Andre walked. He stepped through the automatic doors and into the refreshing afternoon sun, glancing up as he exhaled softly, murmuring, "Now we're flying." This time it wasn't merely the plane that had ascended, it was the entire world around him, transformed one policy at a time, one heart at a time, a father's steadfast resolve resonating far beyond the clouds. If this story moved you, please give it a like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel for more impactful stories like this one on the way. Marcus Carter's story highlights the dangers of unconscious bias and the power of dignity in the face of injustice. It teaches us that assumptions based on appearances can lead to unfair treatment, emphasizing the need for empathy and verification rather than snap judgments. Marcus's calm response shows that remaining calm can be more effective in exposing others' faults than anger, promoting accountability rather than division. In today's America, where diversity is a strength, this lesson is profound. Bias, whether racial, economic, or any other reason, is still present in our workplaces, schools, and public spaces. The story urges us to stop, question our instincts, and seek the truth before acting. In a professional setting, for example, checking the facts, like Marcus's ticket, can prevent discriminatory decisions. At the community level, listening to the experiences of others builds understanding. To do this, we can adopt simple habits, verify before judging, humbly engage, and educate ourselves about the perspectives of others. In doing so, We create inclusive environments where everyone feels like they belong. Like Marcus, we can lead by example, ensuring fairness and respect shape our interactions, making society more equitable, one choice at a time.